Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I'm really not that into the cryptocurrencies. I've got all my money tied up in GameStop stock. But, no, just kidding. Keith and B. Demon both sent me a story and said, Steve, have you caught this one out of Germany, a story out of Germany, where the man there is keeping $60 million in Bitcoin from the police by simply not revealing his password. And, of course, the people who know about Bitcoin will say, Steve, this is one of the great things about Bitcoin. You know, if you get your money in the bank, other people can get it. If you've got your money stuffed in a, paper bag underneath your mattress, other people can get it. And of course, if you lose your money, it's gone. But if you've got your money in Bitcoin or your savings in Bitcoin, it's out there and you can make it to where you're the only person who can get it if you play your cards right. Now, there have been problems, Mount Gox, but here it is, the man in Germany keeping $60 million in Bitcoin from police by simply not revealing his password. So Ian Carlos Campbell wrote the story for TheVerge.com, and he says authorities have seized his digital wallet, but not his password, which of course they need. So the cool thing about Bitcoin, of course, is its apparent benefits, like the ability to be anonymously owned and securely transferred. These are also the things that often create situations like this. Police in Germany have seized more than $60 million in Bitcoin from someone, but they can't access it because the person they took it from won't tell them his password. The man in question was sentenced and has served his time in jail for installing Bitcoin mining software on other people's computers. And throughout the entire process, he never shared a peep about how German authorities should get in. They told Reuters, we asked him, but he didn't say. That is, they asked him about, what's your password? And he goes, oh. It presents a big and probably obvious question. Can you really seize something, such as money, that you can't access or use? And that's a problem. The even more glaring issue is how often passwords, pins, and their collective absence pop up in stories about Bitcoin, illegal or otherwise. There's a recent story in the New York Times about a programmer with his own Bitcoin fortune locked in a secure hard drive that revealed an amazing statistic. It appears that about 20% of Bitcoin in existence today completely lost or locked up in wallets with lost passwords, meaning that they are completely inaccessible. Now, they're guesstimating on some of that, but there's some famous stories about guys who come out and said, yes, I got the money, it's on this, I lost my password. There's also the people who put the password on something and they lost that. It's a famous story about a guy who had his password, I believe, on a hard drive, and the hard drive got hauled off to the dump, and now the dump has got something in it worth a ton of money. Yeah, they're saying it could be about $140 billion of value that's locked up or inaccessible for various reasons. So this German Bitcoin enthusiast is sticking it to the people who had him locked up, or it could be he forgot his password. You don't know. Reuters reports that prosecutors have assured the man that he cannot access his money, but they can't access it either. So right now, the amount of Bitcoin that's locked up out there just got a little bit bigger. And this guy, like I said, had 50 million euro value in Bitcoin, and they're at a standoff because the man was sentenced, served his sentence, got out, and apparently as part of his sentence was required to surrender his Bitcoin that he'd ill-gotten, but he won't do that. So they're stuck, and that does remind us, of course, the story I did not too long ago about the ship of gold to Central America. There was Tommy Thompson was the man who spearheaded the efforts to salvage that ship, and they got a lot of gold off of it. They found the ship in 1988. And when they started recovering gold off it, the investors thought, great, we're going to get our money back. And they got a bunch of gold off and they sold it in various markets. But they got even more gold off it after that. And some investors said, you know what, we don't think we're getting our fair share here. So they filed a lawsuit against Tommy Thompson. And somewhere along in the lawsuit, he just disappeared and became a fugitive. And a fugitive warrant got issued for him. And they finally tracked him down, I think in like 2015 maybe? I think about 2015, he's hiding out in Florida. I've seen a couple documentaries on this as well. And he got dragged into court. And at one point in time in court, a judge asked him and said, look, you know, your investors say there's this money out there. this gold off this ship that you have in your possession that they have a right to, at least a portion of it. And apparently he had said, okay, I will reveal that if that'll help get me out of the situation. The court said, okay. And then he later said, oh, I forgot where it is. And he had a bunch of different stories, claimed that he'd put the money into suitcases that were in a storage locker someplace. Someone else testified on his behalf and said, yeah, but I gave those suitcases to some guy whose name I don't know. And Thompson himself, I believe, even said at one point in time that the money was put into a trust that he has no control over and he also has no knowledge of. And it's like, why would you put it into a trust that you have no control of and you have no knowledge of? But the sad part is, for Mr. Thompson, is that when the court didn't believe him on that, the court said, well, I'm going to find you in contempt because he had said, I will reveal the whereabouts of this stuff to get out of this trouble. So when the court says, okay, reveal it, and he says, I don't remember, I can't do that anymore, the judge came to the conclusion that the man was not telling the truth. So the judge says, I'm going to hold you in contempt of court and fine you $1,000 a day until you change your mind. And Thompson stuck to his gun and said, I can't change my mind because I don't know where the stuff is. And so he's been sitting in jail now for a few years. $1,000 a day is racking up, and it's one of those things. Is this a battle of wills, or is the guy really just not capable of revealing the information? And this does happen. So as you can imagine, in Germany, the man says, I don't know the password, or I can't give you the password. In America, Tommy Thompson says, I don't know where the stuff is. And so there's several ways of looking at this. And I got a lot of people with the video I did about the Central America, the ship of gold story, who said, but Steve, this is so unfair to lock somebody up because they simply won't cooperate with the court. Well, but you're the court. Let's assume you're the court for a minute. You're the judge. And you have someone in front of you. And they're supposed to tell you something. They promise to tell you something. I will reveal all. They come in front of you and go, I changed my mind, or I forgot. Now, if you believe them that they forgot or whatever, you could say, okay, these things happen. You could let them go. If you're convinced they were lying to you, what do you do? And so in the old days, a couple hundred years ago, they might have ways of making you talk. But in a civilized society, the judge has only so many options. And one of them is to hold the person in contempt and throw them in jail and see what happens. And that actually happens, I wouldn't say a lot, but it happens often enough. And usually it's when somebody refuses to testify. So somebody is a witness to something. It's very, very important. And they show up in court, they get on the stand, and they just won't testify. Or they won't take the stand. And it's not because they're trying to plead the fifth. Let's assume that's not the case. It's just that they've changed their mind, or they don't want to testify, or they're scared, or whatever. They just won't testify. And there have been situations before where somebody who won't testify, the court will have a hearing with just that person, not the jury or anything like that. So you understand that you've been served a subpoena. You must testify. If you don't testify, you will be found in contempt of court. And the person can sometimes, I don't care. And I've seen cases and read about them where somebody says, I'd rather go to jail than testify for whatever reason. So somebody gets sent to jail. And the question is, how long can you hold somebody in jail simply because they're refusing to testify in a case? Well, strangely enough, as you can imagine, trials don't last forever. Some do, but seemingly. But trials, one of the reasons that they want to really, really turn the heat on is because if a case is proceeding and a key witness refuses to testify and is sitting in jail, sooner or later the case is going to end. So the case ends, verdict comes down. Now what do? So this person still violated a court order. But how long do you leave them in jail for that? So a lot of places, depends on whether you're in the state system or the federal system and also which state you're in, a lot of places will have a time frame and say, okay, contempt of court up to a certain length makes sense. It might be 90 days, it might be 120 days, something like that. But in Tommy Thompson's case, the judge, they've actually held hearings afterwards where his attorneys have said, you can't hold this guy year after year after year for a simple contempt thing. And as of right now, all the courts have agreed with the judge on this one, saying it looks like the guy knows and is simply not revealing the information because he's hoping he can get out and then re-access that stuff that doesn't belong to him. I'm not saying it's right. I'm merely pointing out that the law and the courts have so far held it to be right. But I've heard of other situations where somebody refuses to testify, the trial happens, the trial ends, and then 90 days into this confinement, they bring the person back into court and say, just to let you know, you're free to go. And they let them go. But they spent 90 days in jail for contempt of court. And there are some other nuances to contempt of court. I've never really done too much on this. But I can tell you another interesting note is that suppose a person is in court. They're a witness, a litigant, whatever. And the person does something crazy, okay? Something crazy. And the interesting thing is, they could be held in contempt of court, but if the judge was in court and saw it happen, the judge might be a witness, number one. And number two, the judge might be actually affected by what that person did. So there's famous cases such as the Manson case, Helter Skelter with Vincent Bugliosi, out in California, where one of the defendants tried attacking the judge in court. Generally not something attorneys advise you do if you're in a trial, but, you know, we can call that Plan B. So if you tried to attack the judge, if you had tried to attack the judge, and the judge is going to hold you in contempt for that, is it fair for that judge to be the one who holds you in contempt? And there actually is case law on this, depends what state you're in, about whether or not that judge can hold the hearing about your contempt, or whether another judge has got to come in and hold the hearing because, number one, the first judge is a witness. Number two, the first judge is obviously going to be biased because that guy came after me, you know. So weird stuff. But back to the original story. Right now in Germany, there's a German man who has presumably the key to unlocking $60 million worth of Bitcoin. He's served his time. He's out now. And the police have got his digital wallet, but they don't have the password. And they're at a standoff. It'll be interesting to see what happens. So there you go. German man keeping $60 million in Bitcoin from police by not revealing his password. Ian Carlos Campbell wrote it. Keith and B. Demon sent it to me. Thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. When one door closes, another opens.